You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Matt Cummings and Weston Williams. All right. In this episode, Weston pays tribute to our latest departed great, the Finnish phenom Kaija Saariaho. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, dude, where's our music director? Hey, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. Click follow, Apple Podcasts, hit the plus. I know it's going to be good. Send us that voice memo. Email us your hot takes. operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beer coaster and the OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. We just got a fresh batch of lapel pins, guys.
Ooh.
Hot off the presses.
Matt Cummings, there he is. Great to have Matt back in the Studio B setup.
I know, George,
here.
you and I have been ships that pass in the night
I
this
know, it's
spring.
been a bit, man. You know, hardest working people in showbiz.
You decamped to my hometown last time I could be on the show, and
That's right. There I was in Pittsburgh. Weston Williams.
I was a ship passing in a chapel, and then wherever one goes to turn 30. So I am older. I am wiser. Fun fact, my lovely wife, for my very first birthday after we got married, put up a little banner that said, "Happy birthday, Weston." It said, older, wiser, hotter. Within 20 minutes, the hotter had fallen down, and she tried to stick it up with new tape, and it fell down again. So that's where I'm at mentally.
Divine intervention.
Excited to be back. I may not be hotter, but I am older. So
yes.
That's good. That's fun.
That's bizarre. Well, congratulations again to you.
Thank you.
Super fantastic. The Detroit Grand Prix, which is part of the IndyCar circuit, was this past weekend in the Motor City. And I was disappointed that Detroit Opera was not part of any of the proceedings. I thought that maybe like one of their singers was going to be doing the anthem or a God Bless America.
I think what they should have done was sent out just a normal car and put the principal trombonist in the back seat just revving as hard as he could to make it sound like it was just like however many horsepowers is a lot. I realized I didn't know. I was going to say 12. I'm like, that doesn't seem very high. How many is a lot of horsepower? Do we know the answer to this question?
I mean, we might not, but someone probably out there does know that.
Please let us know at operaboxscore@gmail.com how many is a lot of horsepower.
Are a lot of power.
Well, so it was either that or Yuval Sharon, the artistic director at Detroit Opera. He was going to direct kind of like the opening ceremonies, and then for the race, all the cars were going to drive backwards.
Yeah, backwards. There it is.
Grateful to have Weston back in the editing suite, by the way. If you've
we're all
suffered through the
grateful for
last
that.
2 shows, you know that Mr. George, he does a lot of things, but
an apology to all of our listeners whose ears may never recover from the audio quality of the past week or so. So, yeah.
Let's get down to it. Let's talk some opera.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is OBS Hall of Famer, our enthusiastic, yet humble, salute to a distinguished opera artist who has gone above and beyond to contribute greatly, distinctively, and with grand significance to the art and honor of opera.
We have a very special Hall of Fame this week. Unfortunately, I found out from Oliver Camacho, of all people. He sent me an email. He's currently in mourning now, I suppose, which is why he isn't here.
He's currently in Boston, which is basically the same thing.
It's basically the same thing, yes. Kaija Saariaho has died on last Friday. We're recording on Monday, so it's only been really 3 days, I think. Mm-hmm. And this one really hit me quite hard. because she was such an incredibly important composer to me. I remember around late high school, maybe early college, my taste in opera was rapidly maturing into the strange amalgamation of weird sounds that it currently is. But as that was happening, I was looking at my playlist and figuring out that there was something very wrong with the gender makeup, especially. A lot of men, a lot of male composers all over the place. A lot of Central European composers. And so I specifically remember going out to try to find a woman composer that I would really, really resonate with. I don't think
Saariaho was the first female composer
she was not. She was not the first I ever listened to. I found some others first. I probably found like Ethel Smith or Barbara Strozzi first. But I didn't really click with Ethel Smith's music. I think she has kind of a, as radical as she was politically, I don't think she has a particularly radical sound to her music.
The Wreckers, right?
I do like the Wreckers a lot, and I would love to talk about it on the show one day because I've matured in some ways in terms of being able to appreciate that sort of thing. But it's very British, which is not always what you want. Sorry, George. And Barbara Strozzi.
You want, George, but
and Barbara Strozzi, I had not had the great awakening yet, encountering historically informed performance. So I was searching around. I found a few composers here and there, but then I found a very special recording of an opera called L'amour de loin, which translates to Love from Afar. I heard like a little tiny clip on the internet somewhere, and I was fascinated because I never heard anything like it before. And I bought it on CD, as one does. And when it arrived, I put it on, and I remember literally just, it took me one or two tracks to sort of get into the sound world of it. But by the beginning of track 3, which I'm going to play now, I was completely hooked. This is the beginning of track 3 from the opera L'amour de loin. It's the Kent Nagana recording. This is the Marie Anne Todorovich singing the role of the Pilgrim. But just listen to what happens with the strings followed by the piccolo and the woodwinds bubbling up behind it. Just take a listen. that moment really hit me. I had never heard music like that before. I had not dipped my toes really that deep into anything beyond like the beginnings of serialism as far as, you know, stylistic modernism was concerned. And this is like a completely different thing.
It's so incredibly like atmospheric, the way you can like almost feel her music.
Exactly. It's so visceral and yet so modern. I mean, obviously it has very deep roots in the 20th century, but all of her operas, I think all her operas, I could be wrong in saying this, I think they all came out in the 21st. I believe L'Amour de Loin was the first in the year 2000. And this was something completely new to me because my experience with contemporary opera was largely American and minimalist influenced. You know, your John Adams, your Philip Glass, whom I love, whatever Carlisle Floyd was up to at the time. But this was a completely different sound world. She was the first Finnish composer I'd ever heard. And she sent me down this rabbit hole of contemporary Finnish opera, which I would love to like just take a deep dive into one day. Because
we don't have
Finland,
time for that, West.
It hits so far above its weight class. I mean, you know, it's wild. But I do want to point this out. I think that there are a lot of great contemporary Finnish opera composers out there. But Saariaho had a kind of a brilliant collaboration with her librettist of choice, Amin Malouf, who is Lebanese French, and he writes almost exclusively in French. While most singers, when Saariaho first got on the scene, could not really sing a lot of Finnish. Even, you know, if you go back to even Sibelius, a lot of his songs are in Swedish. You know, if you go back early enough, you don't have a lot who are like really, really getting in deep into the text because there's just less people who speak Finnish. But because she had access to this really, really good librettist who wrote in French, she was able to like bring her sensibilities as a Finnish composer to the center of Europe. And that's a kind of the key for her fame. But I don't want to say like that is not why she's famous. She is famous because she's just that good. Yeah. She's always been a really deeply musical person. She was born in 1952. And as a child, she often told a story about how she was always imagining music in her head to the point where she once told her mother to come in and turn off her pillow because the pillow was playing music in her mind too loudly. She was, I haven't come across any articles that explicitly say that she had synesthesia, but the way she talks about how she experiences music really, I think, speaks to that. She
like music as color.
Yes, she experiences sounds and color interchangeably. She also talked about smells for certain colors as well. She started to compose as a kid at the age of 10, but she did it in secret because her family wasn't very musical. And in her mind, she had this idea of a composer as being a man, an old man. She had this image of this stern portrait of Sibelius, you know, kind of looking down at her, right? Which, you know, we all do sometimes because I am a Sibelius stan.
We all have our own Sibelius, Weston. It's so true.
Just a little internal Sibelius trying to get us to sing Finlandia.
Lord knows that everyone's familiar with like very austere portraits of very serious composer men. Was this something that continued to be an issue for her as she kept studying?
Well, she started to like really, you know, as she went through school and grew a little bit older, she eventually went to school, I believe, for graphic design as well as music. So she did kind of deal with that, you know, on a personal level. She realized that was silly and that she could compose, right? But she was, even though she was free of sort of that internalized sexism, she was not free of institutionalized misogyny. There's an example I found in one obituary that I actually didn't know, that some of her professors actually refused to teach her on the grounds that she was, quote unquote, too pretty and would soon be married and therefore stop composing.
And this was not an episode of Mad Men.
Yeah, no, this was pretty bad. I mean, well, I guess it was a little bit later, probably been 70s at that point. But her response to this is kind of great. She says, at some point I thought, well, that's what they think, but I'm going to write my music anyway, which I think is great. It's very her. She helped create a contemporary art music organization called Korvat Auki with such luminaries as Esa-Pekka Salonen, who has always been a big supporter of her music. She eventually ended up moving away from Finland and to Paris, and she took classes at IRCAM, which is the Avant-Garde Electronic Music Institute, which we all know and love. I do. Pierre Boulez founded it, to give you a sense of that sort of pedigree. And while she was there, that's when she really started to find a real voice. She was really interested in electronics initially. She helped develop some of the first computer-assisted composition techniques. But everything really started to slide into place when she encountered a musical movement called spectralism. The biggest proponents are probably Gérard Grisey probably in French, and Tristan Morel. We don't talk about spectralism very much here in the opera world at all, which I think is a shame. It is a style that is characterized by a rejection of typical musical construction on a base level. We're not thinking about things in terms of scales anymore. We're not thinking about things in terms of even like, serialism, 12-tone boxes and stuff. We're not thinking about those sorts of things. They wanted to construct sound on a timbral level. So you're taking like literally the natural harmonic series of instruments and electronic sounds and building off of those to create a new musical space. This is a really eerie and alien sounding effect, especially if you're not used to it. But because it's all based on like these like fundamental like tones that you can really only see in like spectrograms and stuff on computers and stuff like that. It sounds very natural at the same time. It's working a lot with natural harmonics and resonances of instruments. So a really good spectralist composer can really create this really like alien space like we heard earlier. There's a lot of microtones. She likes a lot of big walls of sounds. The spectralist influence you can hear a lot in Scandinavian countries nowadays, which you often hear them imitating like geological processes like the movement of tectonic plates and stuff like that. But it remains kind of obscure in the opera world, I think, because when you're talking about these big, weird, fundamental forces, it's hard to take that and boil it down to a dramatic level, right?
They're usually like really large scale works of like things moving very slowly and subtly over time.
Yeah, this is something that I often feel like I have a problem with a lot of classic impressionist operas for a similar reason. When you're talking about like the whole tones of impressionism, there's not a lot of tension, there's not a lot of dissonance, it's hard to create drama on a fundamental level with that set of techniques.
Yes, and Melisande, oh my God, something please happen. Anything happen.
Exactly. What makes Saariaho unique is the way that she takes that abstract aesthetic and molds it into a form that is dramatically coherent. She didn't know she could do this for a long time. She was somewhat famously inspired to begin writing operas after watching Messiaen's Saint Francis of Assisi. I'm not going to try the French pronunciation because Oliver would correct me if he was here. But that's a good jumping off point to understand her approach to opera. If you've ever heard that piece, it's glacial, it's long, but there is still that human and nature element that really works.
And we're talking long, like 4 compact disc recording long.
Yes. Luckily, Saariaho didn't really go the incredibly long route, but she does love to explore that exotic, shimmering sound world that's kind of at the edge of human senses and sort of this magical, ghostly realm. And I think a good example of that comes from her opera, Only the Sound Remains. I have never heard this opera all the way through. I'm still impatiently awaiting a recording to come out. I believe the opera premiered in 2015, I think. So this is pulled from from a trailer with Filip Jarowski. This opera is inspired by Japanese no plays, and it's about a lute-playing ghost, which is a very Saariaho thing to write an opera about. This is from
and a very Filip Jarowski thing to be in an opera about.
Exactly, such a great collaboration. But let's take a little listen to this production from Dutch National Opera. So as you can hear, she's great at creating the sense of the strange in her music. Her characters are outgrowths of this atmospheric sound world. They're it's kind of interesting because it feels very expansive, but at the same time, you really feel like the characters are being pinned in. There's no other place that the characters could exist except in this mass of atmospheric sound. I sometimes get the sense when I'm listening to Saariaho that I can't breathe, you know? When she really lets loose orchestrally, there's something that just feels so alive and massive to it. It's almost not necessarily in a scary way, but like kind of like an eldritch horror a la H.P. Lovecraft, you know? There's just something so like you feel so small and the people on stage feel so abstract, but she still manages to find that humanity in them somewhere. They're never fully subsumed by the orchestra in the way that, like, you know, an early Strauss opera might completely wipe out, you know, an ordinary, you know, singer. There is this level of organic outgrowth of the sound that becomes these characters. She likes,
and her last opera was very much about people.
Yes, it was. And that's really interesting, too, because she kept developing her style up to the very end. Obviously, we've heard a lot so far, a lot of her, you know, really abstract kind of magical soundscapes. You know, this one is about a lute playing ghost. The last one is about L'amour de loin is literally about falling in love with a person you've never seen without even really a description of that person.
That idea of courtly love.
Exactly, but in a very sort of, you know, in a very
the
mystical
loving
sense,
the idea
right?
of the idea and ideal of someone.
Yeah, the idea of the person really subsumes the actual person, while still being clearly the person, you know. But at the end of her career, her last opera, Innocence, which came out in 2021, she starts to take a turn back into the human again. This is a really fascinating piece. I didn't actually know until I started researching this that there was the full opera available on YouTube, which I encourage everyone to check out. It's really good. I mean, big trigger warning. It is about dealing with the trauma of a mass shooting in a school. But, you know, in this sound world where she keeps on going back to these, like, you know, almost religious figures, this mystical realm, bringing it back into this very, like, real, uncomfortable area, but that we are so familiar with, especially here in the U.S., of this repeated trauma of watching mass shootings. It's such a fascinating take on it that I never would have considered. I think that sometimes we can almost mechanize political issues in a way where we construct these boxes and these platforms. But she very much is in a realm that is so much a part of reality, yet completely unlike reality, that it forces you to think about it in a different way. But at the same time, she's also, like, making sure that her own music doesn't get too far out into her own comfortable abstract sound world. There's almost like a little postmodern turn. You'll hear in this, there's this sort of like half-sung amplified moments. There's actually a piano which features very prominently in Innocence, which is unlike a lot of her other works, because, like I said, a lot of her spectralist influence is based on natural overtones and spectral composition. But a piano is very bad for that because it's an equal temperament, which is a whole other, a whole other discussion on a music theory level.
You're very locked in with kinds. Yeah.
You're trapped within a very sort of traditional, these are the notes, don't worry about it kind of mold, but she still manages to elevate it and bring it into a new place. This is a really, really cool piece inspired by Wozzeck, so you know I love it. This is a recording from the Aix-en-Provence premiere in 2021, conducted by Susan Melky.
If I told you my brother had made me swear not to tell anyone, nobody would have died. I could have prevented it all from happening.
Tu as trahi ton frère.
The shooter shot me in the 3 shots and I died at once.
But I wanted to participate in my brother's adventure. We shared a secret and it made me feel important. He was my hero.
Sri Rani, Abila sem mrtva.
I loved my brother. I love him still.
Weston, give us a couple quotations before we get to the final clip.
Well, I wanted to. When I was reading some, obituaries, a lot of people were interviewing Esa-Pekka Salonen because he knew her so well, and he would point out how much of a loved figure she was still is, honestly, in in Finland. Finland is such a small country,
Right.
but it has such an amazing classical music scene. Salonen said in one, I think this is from the NPR obit. He said people would go and talk to her and thank her for the music. Taxi drivers would tell her that they loved her opera. It was on that level. I think partially it was a devotion to her art that made her want to live away from this kind of pseudo-celebrity life in Finland, and spend most of her career in France. But you still see such a deep connection with the place that she came from that it's impossible not to feel that resonance. Finnish composers, I always say, sound like Finnish composers. But like when you see interviews with her, there's a documentary about the making of one of her operas. You really get this sense that she is kind of aware of all this stuff around her, of the fact that she's a celebrity in Finland, of the fact that she's a woman in a still male-dominated, art and industry. But she has an active disinterest in that kind of ephemera, because for her, it's all about her art. She was always very open about what she hadn't done before and was very willing to talk about her inspirations and the artists she was collaborating with on stage. And of course, she's a significant historical figure, but when she was always questioned about her place in history, she always brushed it off. When journalists kept asking her about how she felt about being the first woman in over a century to have an opera at the Metropolitan Opera, she got annoyed and said, with social media, the cult of personality has taken over. Could we finally speak about the music? Which is a great line that is so Kaija Saariaho.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing. She throughout her entire life, she was meeting institutional and personal sexism in her life. She was very aware of the limitations of her native language artistically. She was aware of the possibilities of the kind of music she wanted to write and the limitations of that music. But she was always, always, always willing to completely put herself into her music. And it's just, she is one of truly the most special composers that I've ever come across. And really, for me, defines in an even greater way than I think, a lot of the minimalists and, hypermodernists that are still around. She defines what 21st century opera can be and could be, and allows for the possibility of more and better. I just want to close here with another clip from L'amour de Loin, kind of acknowledging that place in history, but I encourage you to listen to the music. This is from the historic Met production. This is from the final aria, Si tu t'appelles amour. Apologies to the French.
Si tu t'appelles amour.
Thank you. In the absence of Oliver, Matt will do. This is sung by Susanna Phillips from the Met production, and it's so gorgeous. It's so alien in sound, but the performance is so human. And it was such a historic moment, but a genuinely beautiful moment. Just take a listen.
Let us know what your overlap with Kaija Saariaho might have been. operaboxscore@gmail.com. You can send us an email or even send us a voice memo. Micro segment just to transition us from the Hall of Fame into the 2-minute drill. So I'm a huge fan of Jeopardy.
Who isn't?
What a tonal shift, George.
Very recently on the show, Ken Jennings is hosting the show. The final Jeopardy clue was opera related, and I'm going to throw this over to both Matt and Weston. So let's say it's Final Jeopardy, and each of you, you're tied at $10,000 each. So here's what I want you to do: is I want you to, first of all, hear the category, which is just how they do it on the show. The category is opera and history. And now you want to wager how much money. You each have $10,000 you want to wager. Everybody's wagered at this point, so I will give you the answer. The last performance at the Vienna State Opera before it was destroyed in 1945 by Allied bombs was this opera from 1876. Cue that famous music.
Do 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 do.
There we go. Oh, I thought you were gonna.
Well, I can't get another copyright strike, George. They're after me.
Yeah, you can't. Okay, you get 30 seconds on the show, but you don't need 30 seconds. So you are tied. So we would go in alphabetical order, I think is how they did it.
Sure.
Matt Cummings, what did you write down?
1876 sounds like a Wagner opera to me. And I don't know the years when all of those were written, but I'm going to guess Tristan and Isolde. What is?
Okay, you all.
Almost lost it.
You're good. That is incorrect.
I think it's a little bit. I think.
And how much is it going to cost you?
Oh, I went for a true daily double, Alex.
You went for a true daily double. Oh wow. Okay. Weston, what do you got?
What is one of 5 Handel operas? No, I think I want to say Matt's on the right track here. It feels like a Wagner. I don't remember the exact dates. I am inclined to say Valkyrie. What is?
You are also wrong.
Oh no!
I was also wrong too because I watched this on YouTube and I timed myself in 30 seconds and had a complete brain meltdown. The answer is, what is Götterdämmerung?
Oh, a ring cycle.
Which is from 1876 and of course would make kind of thematic sense unintentionally.
That would, yeah, that would.
With, the destruction of the Vienna State Opera. So
which they bombed because they thought it was a train station. Fun fact.
Well,
Shouldn't
what does
this
that
is
tell you
why
about
you
that?
don't design your opera houses like train stations. We all
Exactly.
know
And you know
this
what?
now.
The Viennese complained about how ugly they thought that opera house was, and then they built it
man.
back exactly the same way.
Never happy.
Because then it was
Never
old enough that they liked it.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought it was cool that opera made it onto Final Jeopardy. That's great. And all 3 of us, we got it wrong. The 2-minute drill, we're going to get that right.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Multiple singers are considering legal action against Maggio Musicale Fiorentino after the organization canceled a planned production of Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg just 6 weeks before the start of rehearsals, citing a situation of unpredictable emergency. A replacement revival of Falstaff, which only employed 4 of the 17 singers, was announced in its stead. Said tenor Paul Curivici, Meistersinger would have kept my family with our heads above water for about 4 or 5 months, but it's always the, quote, least important freelancers who suffer. Maggio Musicale said that it had the right to withdraw the contract under force majeure.
The Metropolitan Opera is reportedly being sued by a former employee over failing to prevent a cyber attack that crippled the company in December 2022. The attack allegedly caused a data breach of the personal information of over 45,000 people. The suit claims that the Met's response has been, quote, woefully insufficient, saying that the Met knew about the breach long before informing the public and only offering a year of identity and credit monitoring services to affected individuals.
In an update to a previous story, Natalie Stutzmann has issued a formal apology to the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. Quote, "It saddens me deeply that my comments have caused such disappointment amongst the orchestra. My intention was only to celebrate the fact that Simon McBurney's wonderful production of The Magic Flute celebrates the orchestra visually, including it in the production, and I wanted to focus on that. It was certainly not my intention to diminish or undervalue in any way the stature and standing of your outstanding orchestra."
In trade news, conductor Gustavo Dudamel has resigned from his position as the music director for Paris Opera after only 2 seasons. Dudamel cited personal reasons for his departure, saying, "It is with a heavy heart and after long consideration that I announce my resignation. I have no plans other than to be with my loved ones, to whom I am deeply grateful for helping me to continue to be strong in my resolve to grow and remain challenged, both personally and artistically, each and every day."
Friend of the show, Barbara Hannigan, has been appointed Reinbard de Leo Professor of Music at the Royal Academy of Music. She'll direct ensembles, mentor singers, and offer guidance to students in the new role. Quote, "Barbara is an exceptional force of nature and a brilliant role model," says Academy Principal Jonathan Freeman Atwood. "I am thrilled that she will become part of the fabric of the Academy life."
Italian conductor Speranza Scapucci is set to become the new principal guest conductor at the Royal Opera House in 2025, becoming the first person to hold the position in almost 3 decades, and the first woman to hold the position in, well, ever. Scapucci said she hoped that she would be able to demystify opera for new audiences. Quote, "We can't just be in our ivory tower. We need to bring people to us."
Christmas is coming early for tenor Jonas Kaufmann, who is set to become the next intendant of the Tiroler Festspiele Erl in September. That's all he wanted. He'll take over from the current intendant Bernhard Loebe.
The Giulio Gari Foundation have announced the winners of their 2023 vocal competition. The grand prize went to friend of the show Kimon Murat, second place went to Chinese bass baritone Li Bu, and third to Ukrainian bass baritone Vladislav Bielaski.
Exit stage right. Juilliard has announced the death of professor, author, and vocal coach Corradina Caparello at the age of 79. Caparello taught singers and conductors for nearly 40 years in the art of Italian diction, leaving a profound impact on vocal music performance throughout the world.
English tenor John Dobson has died at 92. Dobson enjoyed a long career between 1959 and 1996, singing over 100 different roles. He described his job in comprimario roles this way. "Think of all the actors on television who have done 150 films. They're always there, and you know the faces, but you can't quite put names to them. They're my kind of people."
English soprano and mezzo-soprano Catherine Harries has died at the age of 72. Harries specialized in German rep, particularly Wagner, but was also known for creating the title role in Edward Harper's Hedda Gabler.
Czech mezzo-soprano Sonia Chervena has died at 97. She made her debut in 1954, eventually escaped the Eastern Bloc in the 60s, and went on to specialize in 18th century opera. After the fall of the Iron Curtain and her retirement as a singer, Chervena returned to her home country as an actress and even had an asteroid named after her.
And on this day, June 5th, in 1834, soprano Teresa Stoltz was born. She was the soprano who sang the first solo in the premiere of the Verdi Requiem. In 1843, it was the first performance of Donizetti's Maria di Rohan, an opera everyone has seen. Austrian composer Alfred Uhl was born on this day in 1909, and in 1913, it was the first performance of the Stravinsky and Ravel orchestration of Mussorgsky's Kovanchina. That's the second of the 3 versions extant of the opera, and the one that is least frequently performed, but we are celebrating nonetheless. In 1931, it was the birth of English mezzo-soprano Anna Reynolds, and in 1939, Dutch composer Louis Andriessen was born in Utrecht. And finally, happy birthday to American conductor Victoria Bond, born on this day in Los Angeles in 1945.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
And that was the inimitable Irina Arkhipova singing part of Marfa's aria from Kovanchina. That recording comes from a 1989 gala, Stars of World Opera of the Bolshoi. Arkhipova was a titan of Russian opera during the Soviet years, and really I still don't think is known as well as she should be in the Western world, because so many of her recordings were trapped behind the Iron Curtain until the 90s and new millennium. But she is an incredibly intelligent and singer with like a world-class voice. And anytime I'm listening to Russian opera, if there's an Arkhipova recording, that's one that I gravitate to.
So this is the like legal blotter episode, I guess, because people are suing each other and the whole thing. So, okay, Maggio Musicale Fiorentino cancels Meistersinger, which is a big show. I get that. This is 6 weeks before rehearsals, and replaces it with Falstaff.
For an unexpected emergency that no one could have seen, and it's certainly not anyone's fault. Definitely no embezzlement happening at this organization.
I mean, there was flooding in Italy, but this is unrelated to that. So yeah, there's
going to be a lot of allegedlys flying around in our analysis of a lot of these things happening this week.
Yeah.
I think the Maggio Musicale, I don't know enough about how European contracts work to really be like who's in the wrong. I have the sense that they're probably legally allowed to have done what they did, but it does suck, honestly. Certainly they should have done more to fix it. At the same time, was it their general director or musical director who was allegedly he was the former superintendent, and
that's right. That's Alexander Pereira, who resigned after an ongoing fraud not after, but during an ongoing fraud investigation.
That's not suspicious in the slightest. So we'll let them sort that one out. And similarly, this is another one we have to sort out. Let's sort out the big Metropolitan Opera identity theft case.
This is so strange.
So basically there was obviously the cyber attack that crippled the Met for about a week or so in December. And apparently this lawsuit also alleges there were some other ones as well that weren't talked about. And
possibly going all the way back to September, like a whole quarter of the year, there may have been cyber criminals scraping out identifying data like social security numbers, driver's license numbers, credit card numbers. Like,
oh God,
that's a lot of identity fraud risk.
Yes, very much. I mean, the Met is the largest performing arts organization in the U.S. by a very wide margin. So they have access to a lot of materials, a lot of social security numbers, addresses, credit card information. And we're talking about audience members and employees. It's a mess. And I will say a lot of this information that we're hearing is coming through, secondary sources. And of course, the lawsuit is all, again, allegedly. But it does raise some interesting questions, I think, about the responsibility of companies to keep this information in check. Because I don't doubt that an institution like the Met was maybe not on the most cutting edge of cybersecurity before December.
And not even cybersecurity, but like probably technology. These are not usually organizations that have a ton of budget to spend on the latest and greatest computers.
It's not Google.
So the hackers came in with a floppy disk and slid it in.
But this is the world today. Like more and more, I mean, the federal government is asleep at the wheel about privacy, of course, but like more and more states are passing laws about what identifying information you're allowed to have accessible to people and like how you have to purge that. And that's really something that these organizations need to be getting ahead of.
And this is a class action lawsuit, right? So presumably if you've ever gotten like a little thin paper postcard in the mail, which sort of warns you about the class action.
Hey, I got $42 from Apple from my keyboard. So this
is my point, man. Are 45,000 people all going to get a check for like $6 or another year free of credit monitoring?
It is possible. Here's the thing that like worries me. Like, yes, what happened to the Met is unfortunate. They probably could have done better. I would guess they probably could have done a little bit better in that regard. But at the same time, I do think that there's a certain amount of inevitability with these things. These are happening all over the place to everyone because it's so easy if you have like just a little tiny hole, or even if you have like a really top-notch security system, you can really still get, screwed over pretty easily. And like when this kind of thing happens to like a Facebook or an Apple,
right?
And they're paying, $40 to 100 million people, like that I'm not going to lose any sleep over. Like I'm like you, Matt, I got a little sweet kickback from Mark Zuckerberg. But at the same time, my worry with the Met does not have the infinite money glitch like a lot of these big companies do. And I mean, it's possible that they were maybe criminally negligent in how they stored this information. I mean, 45,000, if that's an accurate number, is bonkers.
All of us, of course, are lawyers, which is why we're offering such crack legal analysis.
Allegedly. But I do think that it can be. It concerns me with the Met in its current financial position if it does have to have a massive payout. Disproportionate to the amount of money it actually has.
Exactly.
That could be a problem.
You
right?
give 45,000 people $100 each, and that's almost $5 million that you're losing.
Yeah, and bear in mind, like there is no justice here because, and this might be a bad idea for me to say out here on the internet, but if you all remember the Equifax data breach from maybe 15 years ago or so.
Not
fun
even,
fact,
like 6 years ago. It just feels like 15.
Well, fun fact, I was one of the very large portion of the country whose information went whew, and I am enjoying, I think maybe my 4th or 5th year of free credit monitoring at this point, really good stuff. Really feel like I got the justice on that one. There's a disproportionate response, I think, for like a company like, Equifax, who frankly doesn't even need to exist, getting away with a slap on the wrist and going after a company that might have just been a little bit out of date. Now, do I think that, I think the Met should be like, brought to justice for anything that was genuinely like negligent? That's probably a good idea. But at the same time, this is already such a widespread problem. I mean, there are not many people left who haven't had their Social Security out on the dark web somewhere at this point. So,
right.
I mean, if only the Met could take more time protecting itself from cyber attacks and less time attacking its own employees like Natalie Stutzman.
Oh my God, George!
This is the biggest pile of BS. I know I missed the show when Cummings was talking about this. So we can.
So she gave an interview in the Times. Let's do a quick recap saying that it was very cool that this new production of Magic Flute had the orchestra on stage because everyone could be very connected, and also that was probably less boring than the Met Orchestra. And the Met Orchestra fired back on Instagram with this long diatribe about, of course they weren't bored. They're artists at the top of their craft. How dare she? Blah, 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 blah.
Okay, it's such a pile of BS because first of all, they were bored, that they're just lying about that. But second of all, that wasn't her intention.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
There's you don't bite the hand that feeds you at that level. There is no possible way that Natalie Stutzman was actually attacking the Met Orchestra. Was it? Did she speak clearly? No, but. Isn't it just so obvious? There's no way she would attack.
I know. I'm with you that I really don't think she owed them an apology.
It's
probably good. But from like a PR standpoint, like case closed. We're probably the only ones who are still talking about this 2 weeks later because of the Memorial Day holiday. But
if she was a man, would she have been forced to do a formal apology?
That's something that has crossed my mind, certainly. It did seem like, I think it was the right thing to do for her to apologize. Again, I'm kind of with you guys. I don't think she really needed to because I think every pit musician I've ever met in any company, no matter the size, has been like, oh yeah, at some point you get bored, you know?
Of course, half the time they're all thinking about a burrito because they're hungry.
And having been, granted, a not professional musician, but like having being someone, I don't get bored easily, which is why I can listen to the weird stuff that I do for as long as I do. But like, you know, I wouldn't begrudge anyone that statement. And right. I do think that there's a certain perspective she was trying to come from, you know, because she's obviously a very talented conductor. But she's also first and foremost a singer as well. So she has this, you know,
and a former bassoonist. So it's not like she's never played in an orchestra before.
Yeah, she's got all of it. And I think she was just trying to, like, you know, join up that experience and being like, wow, as a singer, I understand how electrifying it is to be on stage, even if an orchestra member might not care about that. And you know, I think it was very strange how direct the orchestra's social media was about being bummed by that, because it's something I would have read and like it wouldn't even cross my mind. Thought. Yeah. So I don't know who's in charge of the Met Orchestra social media, but it's also kind of weird to deal with someone you just worked with too. So I wonder if there's some other weird animosity going on behind the scenes there, but that's all speculation. Allegedly, you know the drill at this point.
Well, the real question is, was the orchestra more or less bored than Gustavo Dudamel at Paris Opera?
That's the real question, Matt. I mean, like, Dudamel is, we have nothing here except complete speculation. Once more, allegedly is the theme of the episode.
The story is completely... Everyone is saying it's for personal reasons. It's because he wants to spend more time with his family. It's for work-life balance.
Yes.
He's not even committing to, like, going to New York more early.
Yeah, it's just... It is a little weird because this is historically kind of a very, very short tenure at Paris Opera. Only 2 years is not a lot.
Yeah, his contract was set to go through 2026.
Right. Yeah, so
which is a much more normal length of contract for a music director.
Yeah, we have no reason to believe that there was any weird bad blood or anything, but I have seen people speculating about it. But I think those people are not very reliable resources when it comes to factual information. But it is another weird thing and a lot of weird alleged, you know, things going on this week.
Here's what I don't get is that he says, I have no other plans other than to be with my loved ones. Is that like he's really not doing anything else?
It seems like it.
I mean, I would be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised, rather, if he ends up still conducting some of the shows that he might have been slated for. Like, I just don't think there are that many conductors who would be ready to lead The Exterminating Angel on a moment's notice. It's a new work that's only been performed, twice at this point? Right. But what's the other thing he was set for? Lohengrin? Like, there are people that they're going to be able to book who have done Lohengrin before.
Yeah, definitely.
Natalie Stutzmann, maybe.
Oh,
yeah. Bringing it all back around.
Saw what you did there. I loved this quote. John Dobson, more like Don Jobson.
Okay,
this
that's
guy's got
George.
so many roles. I dug this quote. Think of all the actors on television. He said who's done 150 films. They're always there, and you know the faces. You can't put names to them. They're my kind of people. That is like the perfect
opera's
definition.
character actress Margot Martindale.
Literally. I really love this. The Guardian obituary quoted some interviews he had talking about how he wanted to be like a soloist at Covent Garden, and like very quickly he like realized that wasn't in the cards.
Right,
he was disappointed at first, but then he realized I'm doing a valuable thing here. I am there. I'm taking on these roles. I am making my scene partners look good, which is really what you want in any sort of theatrical production. And it's just such a positive, amazing attitude to have for performance. I found it really genuinely inspiring as someone who has also come to the conclusion that I'm not going to sing or act in any sort of mainline way, and I think it's just he'll be really missed. It's people like him that keep this industry going, and that's we depend on them just as much, if not more, than all the big names that end up in the Hall of Fame.
Let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Great to have Matt Cummings and Weston Williams and myself back on the air. One of these days, we're going to get all 5 of us back in the same room again. Good call, bad call.
And then the 7 seals will align. The portals of hell will open.
Good call, bad call. Matt Cummings, what do you got?
We're taping this on Monday, which means that last night was the first Sunday since the end of Succession, and it just doesn't hit the same as it used to. I'm sorry if you listeners are tired of listening to us talk about Succession. I'm sorry if you thought that you would be over it, but you're incorrect, because it's possibly the best TV show that I've ever seen, and I will definitely be listening to the long Fresh Air interview that just got posted this afternoon tomorrow.
Weston Williams.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Succession, because I had my wedding on a Sunday, and I was getting my hair trimmed that morning, and I said I was getting married that evening, and the barber was very annoyed at me for making people miss Succession, which is fair, I suppose. But I like to think I made up for it in my a choice of music for the processional, which was the finale of Einstein on the Beach. So you're welcome to all of my wedding attendees for that.
Wow. You got guts, sir. You got guts, man. I got a good call and a bad call. Good call, of course, I guess, is that the American Guild of Musical Artists and Central City Opera finally came to an agreement and managed to get a 5-year contract together. The bad call, of course, must be mine. At the beginning of this calendar year, one of my year's predictions was that they would not make an agreement and that Central City's 2023 summer season would be canceled. Obviously, that's not going to happen. It is going to go ahead, so yours truly...
They got in just under the wire.
Yeah, they did just get under the wire. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com, and you can find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. And hey, that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Just give back to the OBS on our donate page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant, Oliver Camacho, audio editor, Weston Williams. For co-host Matt Cummings, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you sprinkle all of your commentary with the word allegedly for liability reasons. We're back with an all-new show next week, plus you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more potentially synesthesia-inspired spectralism.
Say it 5 times fast.
Join us.